many of the companies that have been waiting to IPO hopefully see Astera and say, oh, okay, this is a good sign. This is a good sign that the market may be right for us. Obviously, Astera Labs, given that it's in the semiconductor space and they're catering to cloud computing and AI technologies, they're able to kind of, capitalize on the investor demand there. And I think it kind of brings back to what a lot of companies will be thinking. How do I make AI a part of my story? And we've seen that with Reddit too, talking about how data licensing to language learning models will be a big part of their future revenue opportunity. So certainly a very different company than Astera Labs, but an interesting one that I think will be a little volatile to watch today.
Yeah, that whole aspect of Reddit that Bailey's been reporting on about this data aspect to it and getting some kind of AI play into that story, I'm not sure I buy it. What do you think, Brianne? Is that a reasonable pitch? Is that a reasonable reason to take a look at this company, Reddit?
It's not a guaranteed revenue driver. We saw, even this past week, the FTC is investigating what data they actually share with these partners they have. Is it okay that they share that? If they were to have a cease and assist where they can no longer share this data, that would be a big problem in terms of their future growth opportunity because they've seen their ad revenue grow 20%, not a number that's exciting a lot of investors. The real bull case is on this data licensing opportunity. So if there's something that hinders that, it makes the story a little less desirable.
Brianne, are you surprised that we haven't seen better, more IPO activity over the past, I don't know, 6 to 9 to 12 months? I mean, we have stock market indexes at or near all-time highs. What's the problem here?
Yeah, I think all the macro indicators would suggest that the market has been or should have been welcoming to IPOs. But we saw with kind of the Klaviyo, Instacart, ARM group that went public this fall, they had lackluster IPOs. That being said, ARM is now trading at double its IPO price. So another one that's really, capitalized on this demand for the AI market. Astera Labs, I think, will be a good indicator for the market. And it's more of a pure tech play than Reddit. So if I'm a private tech company considering my options, maybe my business looks more like Astera than it looks like Reddit. And that makes me feel good about the opportunities in the market. But we're hearing from, the heads of NYSE and NASDAQ that they had these deep pipelines of companies that are preparing to go public. And really, there's a finite period of time that they'll likely do that, given the election coming up later this year, the volatility that could come with that. So I think if Reddit has decent performance, it will certainly encourage others to follow if Astera alone doesn't do that.
Brianne, at what point do we see private equity-backed companies going public again? We saw BrightSpring and Amer with its own kind of different flavors within investors and holdings. Are we going to see companies or management teams just really ripping off the Band-Aid and going public?
Yeah, I think it depends on kind of, what the story is and if it's something that they think will appeal to public market investors. Birkenstock, is a private equity backed company, went public last year, along the same time as, Instacart and those others, performed okay, but not great. So I think, similarly, those companies are sitting on the sidelines. The difference there is that those investors have less likely held those investments for 10, 15 years and maybe have a little bit more leeway in terms of holding in the private markets versus an early stage investor who at this point is very eager to, sell that investment and return capital to LPs and invest in new things. So the pressure dynamic there for liquidity is a little different.
Brianne, I was looking through your notes here today. One data point you provided really jumped out at me. The percentage of public companies has dropped 35% since the mid-1980s when I got my start, while the percentage of private companies has jumped by 43% over the same time period. Wow. So, I mean, that just shows you kind of how the capital markets have changed. I can stay private longer, I guess, than maybe trying to get the public market. So is anything there going to change, do you think?
I think that's a dynamic that's not going to change anytime soon. There's just an abundance of capital available in the private markets, more so than ever before. I think the companies that will feel the pressure to go public are these late stage companies that have already raised a ton of venture capital. They have a lot of pressure from those early investors and shareholders for liquidity. Those are likely going to be the ones to go public in the near future. But to your point, if I'm a 3, 4, 5 year old private company who can raise plenty of capital at the earlier stages in the private markets, I don't have to, disclose all my financials. I have a little bit more privacy almost like as I'm growing through this phase. I don't have the daily mark to marks. That for a lot of companies sounds like a better position to be in. So I think companies will continue to stay private in those early mid years and look to go public later in their life cycles than they did 10, 15 years ago.
What are your expectations for deal flow and IPO volumes in 2024? Because when I talk to bankers, it still feels like the year 2025 keeps coming up.
Yeah, I think that a lot rides on these early IPOs and how well they do. There's certainly plenty of companies who want to IPO or are feeling the pressure to IPO, but they are a little nervous to rip off the Band-Aid. Last year's IPOs didn't really, give them the boost of confidence that they needed to do that. So I don't think we're certainly not going to see a 2020, 2021 year, but maybe we see a more normal IPO year than we did last year. When you look at this year already, proceeds are up 169% versus last year. Deal counts up 15%. So the spigot, I guess, is widening a bit. There's more flow happening.